Welcome everyone to day 2 of Our Pride, an online celebration of everything queer. I'm Ben Kawaller, and I still have no voice because here's the dirty little secret. For me, it's the same day. And that is your glimpse into the mystical world of show business. Now, I'm one of the G's in LGBT, which means I have a privileged position. Unlike the T's, we don't have to explain to straight people what we are. Unlike the L's, nobody needs or particularly wants an explanation of how we have intercourse. And unlike the B's, everyone agrees we exist. I'd actually like to take a moment to give a special hello to all the bisexual men out there. Hi, Steve. I kid, of course. To be clear, there is definitely a perception that bisexuals don't exist, but that is not the reality. In fact, according to Human Rights Campaign, half of all people who identify as LGBT identify as bisexual. Still, complaints of bisexual erasure are rampant. Unfortunately, no one can see where they're coming from. All complaints aside, the past 20 years have been admittedly fantastic for LGBT people. Gays have secured the right to marry, the fight for trans rights is part of mainstream conversation, and queer characters are all over TV. In fact, gay pride organizers have come out with a new rallying cry. We're here, we're queer. Now, this month has been especially good for LGBT Americans because we can no longer be fired for our sexual or gender identity. Arguably, the Supreme Court is just throwing us a bone so they can get back to the important work of keeping money in politics and racial minorities out of voting booths. But I think I speak for all of us on the left when I say, yes, Gorsuch! We actually almost booked Gorsuch for this show. Unfortunately, he was doing Wendy Williams today. As for recent local events here in LA, well, on June 14th, thousands of Angelenos came out for All Black Lives Matter, a march in support of LGBT people of color and their allies. In fact, All Black Lives Matter drew people from across the political spectrum, as half of them hadn't read past the first word. Anyway, we've got a terrific show for you. I'm going to be talking with former TV star and current LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. Then, legendary sodomite and former West Hollywood Mayor Jon Duran will be joining us. Before those people, though, my first guest today is a regular old straight cisgender mom. But she ought to be every queer person's hero, if only because she was the only member of Congress to show up on Halloween in costume. She's a friend of the LGBT community and, more importantly, a friend to humanity. Please welcome one of my favorite congresswomen, U.S. Representative Katie Porter. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, what is it like being one of the last ever members of the United States Congress?
What do you mean last ever?
Well, that was a joke about how it's the end of the country.
Oh.
I guess it didn't hit.
Well, the way it's going, it could be. I see what you're saying. Right after the killer bees come. So Congress this has been an uncertain time for sure. In my first year, we faced a government shutdown. We faced an impeachment. Now this pandemic, and so it's definitely been a bumpy introduction to democracy. But I'm an optimist.
Do you blame yourself?
No, I do not blame myself. I blame you, actually.
Oh, wow. That is harsh. Wow. You had so much support, but it's going to be a rocky 15 minutes. A lot of Americans have evolved on their feelings about LGBT issues. I wondered if your feelings about any of the LGBT issues that are in the news, any of your feelings about LGBT issues have evolved over your career.
No, I've pretty much always loved gays and still do. One of my favorite memes of me is me saying gay rights. I remember my staffer asked me to do that, and I was like, okay. And I did it very enthusiastically. And so one of my favorite things is people will now come up to me sometimes at the grocery store back when we could actually see each other people other than virtually. People would come up to me and ask me to shout gay rights with them and take a video or a picture. So that's really fun. But no, look, I think for me, this is an issue about freedom. It's an issue about making sure that each person has the ability to be happy and to form whatever kind of family or life situation works best for them.
Great. Well, you passed the first question. Good job. What do you think is holding back some Republicans? What do you think their struggle is with LGBT equality and issues?
I mean, you would think, like I said, I think about this as a freedom issue, and that's a core principle of our country. So I think Republicans should be supportive of people having the ability to be free from discrimination, to be free from oppression, and have the ability to have equal access and have opportunities in healthcare and in housing and all these different areas. And so I think, there are those who see that division can be politically expedient, or that fear can be a tool to be used for their own gain. But I think it is so much more fun to live in a society in which we embrace each other, whatever our differences are, whatever choices we make, so long as they're healthy choices that are making us happy. I think that's what we ought to be celebrating.
One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on was because, I don't know how strictly gay this is, but it just feels like anyone who comes to Congress dressed in a Halloween costume on Halloween is a hero of mine, certainly, and should be a hero of the queer movement. And I was wondered, actually, if you were surprised about any of the flack that you got for that.
Well, I mean, I always get dressed up for Halloween. I'm a single parent to 3 kids. And so my kids had all gone off to school in their costumes. I put my costume on. We have rules around the Capitol building itself and the House floor. So I had a dress and a different outfit to wear, to change into when I needed to go vote. But for the morning part, the office part of the day, I was Batwoman.
I'm actually astounded that no one else was dressed up. And was anyone else dressed up?
I mean, look, Congress is not full of fun people. I think it could use a little more lively folks in there. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're the only person dressed up for Halloween in that room, you're the only one of these people I can trust. How can anyone trust any of you? I mean, come on. What's been your best Halloween costume over the years?
Oh, that's a good question. I was a mermaid a couple years in a row, and it was a very sort of luscious mermaid. I had like a long wig, and it was
someone to cart you around.
Yeah, no, it was a good mermaid costume, but I actually really like the Batgirl costume. I've used it a couple times, yeah, it's my kind of go-to. I have 2 boys and a daughter, and they're all really into superheroes. And so my one son is always asking me things or telling me things about the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so this is the world in which I operate in which superheroes are like a big part of my daily existence.
You have made a name for yourself by putting powerful people on the spot, on camera. I wondered if any of your victims have ever approached you after. I mean, what's it like when you see these folks in the elevator?
I think the one encounter that really stands out to me about afterwards was the exchange I had with Ben Carson, the Secretary of Housing. I was trying to ask him about how he could reduce the foreclosure rate among FHA loans and the incidence of blight among those loans. And he didn't know what an REO was. He thought I was talking about Oreos, the chocolate sandwich cookie. After I got back to my office several hours later, after voting and taking other meetings, there were like 10 packages of Oreos in the office. And I was like, what is going on here? And they said, well, people have been dropping off Oreos all afternoon long. And this one package of Oreos is from Mr. Carson himself. And even though I think, I'm nothing against chocolate sandwich cookies, I was disturbed that he thinks it's an appropriate substitute to substitute a package of cookies for answers for the American people.
Do you feel like he is operating in good faith generally?
I think most of the witnesses come to Congress wanting to give answers. They certainly don't come wanting to be grilled.
Right.
But that said, I think their expectation of Congress is often low. And I think that's one of the problems that I see cutting across our political spectrum, and particularly with voters who are I'm 46, with voters my age and younger, is that people just don't have a very high opinion of Congress. And I think that's something that we should be honest about, ask ourselves why that is, and then begin to address it. And I think one of the things, we've talked a little bit about my approach to being a congressperson, but I think people appreciate the fact that I'm a little bit more open about my life, that I'm a regular person. I mean, I drive this country blue minivan that I have a sort of love-hate relationship with, because what other kind of could you really have a healthy relationship with a country blue minivan? And so,
I've had worse.
Yeah, so I think being honest about kind of the challenges that I face as a single parent, the challenges that I face representing a really politically diverse place like Orange County, I think people want to understand what this work is that we're trying to do in Congress.
Who's the most appealing Republican?
Oh, I don't know about that. Let me think. I'll tell you who the happiest Republican is. The happiest Republican is actually Justin Amash because he's no longer a Republican. I think he feels really freed from having to conform with this Republican Party, which values being in lockstep and everybody doing exactly what the president says and never breaking with them. And so I think Justin is really, really happy to be able to be more of his own person as a now officially as an independent in Congress.
Do you have any close friendships with Republican Congress people?
I've made some friends mostly on the airplane. Like it's a long flight to California, and I often fly to Texas, and then I fly to California. So being able to talk with people, and then the orientation is an opportunity to meet some of your colleagues. So there are folks, particularly some newly elected freshmen like Van Taylor and others that are good people to talk to. And we need to be talking to people across the aisle. I represent a lot of Republicans. And so I need to be having those conversations and not be afraid of disagreement. And interestingly, Mark Meadows, who was the head of the Oversight Committee and has now gone on to work in the Trump White House, was actually one of the most friendly, kind of outgoing members of Congress, and was one of the easiest ones to get to know and to become friends with.
Has working with Republicans, or at least alongside Republicans, led you to see any issues differently than you did when you first came into Congress?
Because I represent such a diverse place, Republicans outnumber Democrats in Orange County. I think I was pretty used to having those conversations. I think one of the things that I think would surprise people, though, is how little time we spend gathered together across the aisle. And so, things that might seem small to other people, but if you look at a committee room, the fact that we sit Democrats on one side of the committee room, Republicans on the other side of the committee room, my best friends in Congress are the people I sit next to. It's just like junior high. Whoever you have your locker next to is going to be the person that you're going to get to know. So we could find ways to mix it up more and to have more of a chance to interact with each other across party lines.
I don't really quite know what that means with committee lines and all of that, but what if where you sat were more integrated in that way? Would that just be logistically silly? Because I kind of feel like we're on the brink of a civil war here, and it'd be nice if we, liked each other a bit more.
No, I think it would be great if we just sat in different orders. And I also think we ought to treat some of these committee meetings more like a good dinner party. And we ought to rotate after the main course for dessert. And so get a chance to sit next to different people. Because we sit by seniority, it's more like, my locker was between this one guy named Steve and this one guy named Dwayne, a P and an R because my last name's Porter, for my entire middle school and high school career. Congress can be kind of like that. You can be next to the same people year after year because a lot of it's by seniority. I think mixing those things up is really, really important. And so I think we should think more about how to create opportunities for engagement across the line.
I know you don't set out to make people look foolish, and that's one of the things I really like about you. But I wondered, when was the last time you made a fool of yourself?
Oh, that happens almost every day. I have 3 children. They're 14, 11, and 8. And these are very critical eyes. You want to talk about accountability. Accountability at my house comes from my kids to me. And so they're constantly sort of on me about stuff. But I guess I would say that I tried to help my daughter make something recently, and it involved glitter. And it was slime with glitter in it. And the glitter really got the better of me. I probably will die with glitter in my hair at this point because of that encounter. So I've definitely been bested by an inanimate object recently in the form of glitter.
Well, you just become more and more appropriate a choice for this Pride event, I gotta say. Tell us about a time in your childhood when you did something you knew was wrong, but it was just too irresistible.
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, my mom, she hated gum. She actually still hates gum. She has a real thing against
She sounds
gum.
terrible.
She's a lovely woman, hates gum. And probably because she would never let us have gum, then if we ever got it, we'd keep it and stick it somewhere and she'd find it. And it became a vicious, sticky cycle, shall we say. Anyway, and so when I was about 6, I took a package of gum from a store. And I hadn't even made it out of the store when my mom saw me. And I had to go back in, I had to apologize. I had to write a letter of apology, the whole 9 yards. So that was a powerful lesson that you should, one, not steal, and two, it's important to have your own resources in life so you can afford your own gum.
What's your biggest character flaw? And no non-flaw flaws like I care too much. Give us a good, real flaw.
I can be impatient. I want to get things done. I want to make things better. And I can just be really, really impatient. There's this piece of art that I have, and it says something like, when do you want it? She said. And the answer is yesterday, right? And so I just tend to be very much like that. So I've been trying to work on my patience. Congress is definitely a tough environment for somebody who isn't patient. The way that we vote, it takes hours, a lot of nonsense. You're waiting around. You know, they say we're going to vote at 3 o'clock. That means like 6. So it's not for the punctual.
Here's my last question for you. If you had not gone into law and politics, what would you have done? What's your alternate life?
I would have been a costume person for theater. So a little known fact about me is after I did costuming work in high school and then in college, and then went to Hong Kong for a year and taught 8th grade. But here's the thing. When I came back from Hong Kong and had no job, I was trying to figure out what to do. And I was thinking already I would go to law school, but I hadn't applied. So I had a whole year to burn. And I was living in New York City at the time. And I was like, I'm going to look for a job. And my friend said to me, Katie, there are no jobs for nice girls in the Village Voice. But that is not true, because it's in the classifieds of the Village Voice that I found an opening to be a costumer for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And so that's what I did. It was incredibly fun getting to do that, and I loved it. And I grew up learning how to sew in 4-H and all of that. And so I probably would have continued to do that.
My fantasy career is a set designer, so in an alternate universe, you and I could have worked on a show together.
Been colleagues.
Really sad. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate this. It's really quite an honor to speak with you. I think you're doing incredibly great work, and I hope you're in there for a long, long time, if that sounds pleasant to you.
Yeah, no, I'm not so sure about that.
Right. All right, well, we really appreciate it.
That's a happy thought or not. So
right, if those are well wishes or not. But yeah. Thank you so much. It's really, and happy Pride to you.
Yeah, happy Pride to you and everyone out there.
Before we go on to our next interview, I'd like to take a moment to complain. Not about any of the major troubles of the modern world, but about some of the everyday disappointments that make up what it means to be alive. This is Kvetch Fest. First, if you post a shirtless photo of yourself on Instagram, you ought to commit to going to bed with every person who gives it a like. I'm tired of being titillated without being satisfied. Second, why is everyone all tatted up these days? I've never looked at a guy and thought, boy, he should be much more attractive if someone scribbled all over his limbs. Third, no more racial preferences on dating apps. It's not that people don't have them, it's that we should be ashamed of them. Now that we're spending all day confronting our racism, do we really have to face it while we're on OkCupid? Now this next one's for RuPaul. Stop making drag races. It's always a new season of some arm of this franchise, and I have things to do. Nothing's coming to mind, but I don't know, maybe I'll read a book or something. Now while we're on the subject of drag queens, I would love to see some more actual singing take the place of lip syncing. Some of you, I'm sure, have lovely voices. Be nice to hear them. This note is for the LA gays. Why doesn't anyone know there's show tunes in this town? Sure, I couldn't pick Cardi B out of a lineup, but at least my favorite musical isn't Wicked. And here's another thing. Can we be done with this facial hair trend? Kissing a man shouldn't feel like performing cunnilingus. Finally, I think we can all agree there's a special place in hell for people in relationships who show up at gay mixers. Mixers are for finding sex, love, or employment. If you have a friend you met at the mixer, I suggest you immediately cut ties with this person, as at least one of you is most definitely a sociopath. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk to our next guest. She's on the LA County Board of Supervisors, but before that she was the first openly gay person elected to the California State Legislature. She's taught law at Loyola, USC, and UCLA, and before all that, she was a TV star. Apparently, she was on some show in the 60s called The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. I YouTubed it, and she was very good. The point is, This lady is much more successful than all of us. Please welcome to the show, Sheila Kuehl. Welcome to the show, Supervisor.
Thank you so much, Ben. You can call me Sheila. That's okay.
Thank you, because I'll probably end up doing that anyway, and now I won't feel bad if I do that. But that's very nice of you to say. My first question now is about the books behind you. How much thought did you put into what books might be appearing in this?
Not too much. Since we started doing everything in Zoom, I kind of did things all over the house, and the signal's strong in some places and not so strong. And
Your lighting is fabulous.
Well, it's just my windows, but at night, not so good, But this is near my router, and I thought, well, it's a really messy bookshelf, and maybe that's a good thing. The only thing I actually put up there was the book on suffrage, because as you know, we're celebrating an anniversary of women's suffrage, and I thought that's a good thing to remind people of this year.
It's very well placed. I can see it, read it very clearly. That's an excellent binding it's got on that book. So,
and of course, Robert Frost should be in everybody's, bookcase, I think.
I'm sorry, Robert Frost?
Yes, he's, he was an old guy, old poet.
I remember 10th grade English. Two roads diverged in a, what kind of wood? In a wilderness?
Maybe in a wood.
That's it. Speaking of which, are there any choices that you look back on as particularly pivotal in your life?
I think that there are a couple, and they're not what people usually pick out. First of all, I decided to go to UCLA. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. They were very encouraging, but UCLA, way back in the old days, was affordable, $58 a semester. And it made a difference because every time in my life I would lose a job, lose my acting career, something would go wrong, I would go back to UCLA and work. And it was like a really healing and important place to me. The second most important thing, I think, professionally, was the decision to run for office in '94. It was kind of a big deal. No gay person had ever been elected to the state legislature before, or even gotten through a primary. And so
at that point, that the legislature was full of all of these Bible-thumping Republicans.
Not yet. It was that same year. In '94, Newt Gingrich decided that he was going to have a Republican sweep, and the people that he brought in were Bible-thumping and very adamant and religious, very different from the Republicans who were already there. And when I got there, the old guys in the Senate were mostly fine. The new guys in the Assembly who had taken over were, they were crazed. They would bring Bibles to the floor. They would wear their Boy Scout uniforms to the floor. But that decision.
How old were these people?
Oh, they were old. Some of them were old. But that was a decision that was a little bit scary at the time. And yet, because people remembered my character from Dobie Gillis, it was kind of like, okay, we liked Zelda Gilroy, but she's a lesbian. I don't know. How do you feel about education? Never mind all that other stuff, So made a big change in my life.
Do you think that you were able to make any changes in their perception of gay people, these people who liked you because they knew you from television?
Yeah, Jim Brolty, who was the Republican leader, after we had a sort of a big conflict for a couple of weeks at the beginning, we had stayed up all night to write new rules and instead ended up singing Motown and country western songs together, the old Republican guys and me and a couple of Democrats.
I tell you legislators just can't get anything done, can you?
Yeah, we got everything done, but we have to sing. So He came to my office the next day and he said, I got to ask you a question. If you're gay, how come all my guys like you so much? And I said, well, Jim, that's a very well kept secret. The reason for discrimination is because we're all so fabulous.
People are jealous.
He laughed to his credit. But, I really think that's true. But like any minority, you kind of want to make people feel comfortable about you. You want to make them feel that you're funny. The most homophobic guy on the floor, I went right up to him and I touched him and I said, you have to be very worried because it's catching.
How'd you like that?
He laughed. I mean, make a person laugh and you're on your road, you know.
That's
I've
what
got a
I've
lot
always
done in
said.
the legislature because of that. And also it helps you. It's like you're not all eaten up inside all the time, you know.
Yeah. Um, the California Journal has twice named you, or did twice name you when you were in the assembly. They named you the assembly member with the most intelligence and the most integrity. So, has it been hard being surrounded by dishonest idiots your whole life?
I'm going to give you a serious answer to that.
Please.
A lot of people, I'm going to say the right wing has really been very successful in is convincing people that everybody in government is either stupid or corrupt. And while we were all going, oh no, then I don't want anything to do with government, they took it over. All three, parts of the government, right? They got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the courts. And they said,
And
thank
now,
you very much.
we can finally say they're honest.
Yeah, they can say it, but Twitter
Yeah.
won't even allow them to say it anymore. So I think that 98% of all the people that are in government are very hardworking, honest. You hear that one person is corrupt and the other 99, they don't tell you, oh no, and they're not corrupt. So I think it's important for us, especially this year when we better vote, 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 to really understand government is really important. There's a lot of people struggling to keep it to do good, and they should care about it.
Still, you do have a real reputation for being very smart, and that can, I think, be intimidating for some people. Has anyone ever called you arrogant?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people have called me just about everything that you can think of that begins with A all the way to Z. Um, Arrogant has not been a label given to me a lot because I'm generally pretty easy with myself, and therefore I don't need to really have power over people or be better than people. I'm just me. I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do. And but of course I've lived a long time too, and when I was younger I was less secure, and the less secure you are, the more arrogant you can be. But the more you really feel pretty good about yourself, the easier you are to get along with.
Well, that sounds juicy. Can you tell me a memory of a time from when you were more insecure that you think that might have, when you acted in a way that you wouldn't now, that you are more secure?
It's a little thing. The one that comes to mind was in the legislature. Um, when I was a brand new assembly member in Sacramento, I was the only person in the assembly that asked if I could please go to the Senate budget retreat. And there was no rule against it, so they said sure. So I was the only assembly member there, and they're all very experienced, and they've been there a long time. And so they expect you'll be a fly on the wall. And because I was so insecure, I asked about 100 questions. And it's like, look at me. I'm smart. I'm asking, smart questions. And it took me a while to understand that the less you talk, the smarter you appear.
I can't relate at all. All right. Well, Sheila, since you're so damn smart, I thought we might give you a little quiz just to see how sharp you are. So if you don't mind subjecting yourself to this, I've just got some riddles for you that might be fun. So it starts off easy, but then it gets very difficult. So don't get too sure of yourself here.
Okay.
All right. Here's your first question. When Lisa was 6, her sister Lucy was half her age. If Lisa is 40 today, how old is Lucy?
37.
Very good. Fantastic. I knew you'd get that one. All right.
No, you didn't.
I did. I was terrified you wouldn't, in which case I would have had to
Okay.
end this interview because.
Yes, I could
All
say
right.
20. Okay.
Yeah, right. That's what the idiots say. Anyway, what are 3 different whole numbers whose sum and product are equal?
3 different whole numbers whose sum and product are equal. I have no idea. I don't think I even know what that means.
If you add them up
Oh, I
together,
see.
you get the same.
3 different numbers when you add
Yeah,
them together or when you multiply them.
you get the same answer.
1, 2, 3.
Very good. Terrific.
Okay.
Okay. It's your 2 for, how many of these do we have now? 5? All right.
See, yeah, oh, thought we had more. Okay. What can you put between a 7 and an 8 so that the result is greater than 7 but less than 8?
Anything.
What, like a multiplication sign?
Oh, I thought you meant like 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4.
That is, yes, the answer would, you got it. The answer is a decimal point.
Oh,
You
I
got,
got
you got the answer in essence. We'll give it to you.
Okay.
All right. So far, you're doing really fantastic here. You have 2 US coins whose total value is 30 cents. One of them is not a nickel. What are the 2 coins?
2 coins whose total value is 25 cents.
30 cents.
Oh, 30 cents. What are the 2 coins?
And one of them is not a nickel.
One of them is not a nickel. I don't know.
It's a very annoying answer.
A Confederate 30-cent piece.
Oh my gosh.
No, 2 coins, you
That is-
said.
Yeah, that's a very offensive answer, by the way, in this day and age. You should be ashamed of
Yes,
yourself.
I took that statue out yesterday. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
we're erasing that answer. No, it's a quarter and a nickel. Because the quarter is not a nickel.
Oh,
There you go.
Trixie.
Yeah, right. All right, here's the last one. Oh, and then we have a few more minutes, so maybe I'll ask you something else. I don't know. A grandfather, 2 fathers, and 2 sons went to the movie theater together and each bought 1 movie ticket each. How many tickets did they buy in total?
3?
You're a genius. I think the California Journal totally had you nailed. You're absolutely, well, you were 4 for 5 there. You're an 80% genius, I'd say.
Okay, good. But what's the queer question here?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's all right.
Pride, right? I'm supposed to be talking queer. Well, I do have a queer related question because we haven't talked that much gay stuff. Some. You had 2 bills that really should have become law, as far as I'm concerned, when you were in the assembly, and a whole bunch of others. But of the research I did, you had a marriage equality bill, and in essence, a marriage equality bill, and a single-payer health care bill. And both of those bills passed both houses of the legislature, and then were vetoed by effing Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, can you just tell me about maybe what that felt like, and also, did you have a relationship with Arnold Schwarzenegger? How'd you deal with that?
Well, first of all, the first bill that it took me 5 years to get through 3 different sessions was really to protect kids at school on the basis of sexual orientation or
Dignity
choice.
for All Students Act.
Right, the Dignity for All Students Act. There had never been a category in any law that protected people on the basis of their sexual orientation. And so we just wanted to add those, 2 words. So we got that bill through after 3 tries. And then Antonio Villaraigosa brought a bill to protect us at work so that we had the kind of law that, the Supreme Court 100 years later yesterday just said is okay. The marriage equality bill really was Mark Leno's bill. As we know, it got there through the courts, and now most amazingly, we're there. It was kind of heartbreaking. The most heartbreaking was that Arnold's cabinet secretary was a lesbian who advised him not to sign that bill because it was just too far ahead of its time or something.
Oh my God.
And that made me angry more than anything.
Did you have words with her?
Oh yeah, I did. And with him,
what were the words?
I just said that I thought she should go the other way and telling him what to do or advising him. Arnold would say that we were friends because he likes to be friends with everybody. I thought that he was one of the worst governors we'd ever had because amateurism, in my opinion, is one of the worst things in government, where people say anybody can do it. And then they get into position, well, we're seeing it big time in Washington, but they get into position and then they don't know how to run a state and pretty much take it right, down the drain, which is what happened with him. Talk about arrogance. But turns out he wasn't as bad as the Orange Frito guy now, and it's It's all a matter of comparison. But the single payer bill was heartbreaking because I think we could have had a very different health system in California now when we really needed it for the pandemic.
Yeah, that really would have come in handy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. Any other things you want to touch on before I let you go?
Well, I think it's interesting now in the times when we are so rightfully paying attention to African American people, to Black Lives Matter, to racism, to the way people have suffered and been treated, to think back on our own treatment, our rebelling at our bars because of police brutality. And the way that I think we can say a different experience, but some real understanding, and be a part of that change. I just think it's really that our community is so well placed to help be a part of that change. Looking within ourselves, the way we ask other people to look at their homophobia and transphobia, it's a really important time for us. So, Ben, I'm so glad you're doing this, and I really, really enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you.
My final guest has spent the past 20 years on the West Hollywood City Council, which in fact makes him the gayest man in the known universe. He's also a lawyer who's known for his advocacy on behalf of the HIV positive, LGBT, and addiction recovery communities. Please welcome to the show former West Hollywood mayor and legendary homosexual Jon Duran.
Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Councilman, when can people have sex again?
We've stopped? I didn't get the memo. I didn't realize we'd stopped. Oh, you mean with other people? Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We actually came up with some rules, and I put them on my Facebook about 2 months ago about safer sex during COVID, because during the last epidemic, the HIV epidemic, it was the LGBT community that came up with the idea of harm reduction and safer sex practices. We actually have a lot to teach the world about COVID-19, having been the community at the forefront of the last epidemic.
So what were some of those guidelines?
Well, I think that what people have to remember is that this disease is different than HIV. HIV was transmitted through sexual intercourse primarily with unprotected, right? This one is casually transmitted through the air by droplets of saliva. So it's almost the exact opposite of what HIV was. So anything that involves intimate kissing, intimate exchange of saliva, faces close to close, that is actually more dangerous than other sexual practices. I'm not going to go into detail with you, but you can figure it out.
Right. If all we have to do is have sex without intimacy, I think that's something we can all handle.
I think we've already mastered it.
What else do I have to ask you? So you and I are both sober people. How long have you been sober?
I'll be 24 years sober this year. That's a long time between cocktails.
That's true. Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you remember your first sober Pride?
I do. Yeah, I do. I had a great deal of fear out of going to Pride sober because the event had always been for me a drunken, debaucherous, bacchanalian, moment with my tribe, or just get wasted, stoned, and wake up with the worst hangover and sunburn on Monday morning. And that changed the first time I got sober. And what I found is that even though I had a great deal of fear and anxiety about it, what I really wanted, what I was really yearning for, was that tribal moment. It's a moment that happens for me when I'm on the dance floor with all the LGBT people, and there's that bass drum beating, and everybody is just like this, all simultaneously in one big tribe. That connection was still there. That connection was still made. And the good news was I didn't need alcohol or drugs in order to have that happen. And I've been going sober Prides now for 24 years.
What, if I can ask, has there been a time in those 24 years where you felt like you'd made the wrong choice?
About getting
in terms of sobriety? Yeah, about being sober.
God. No, I was very, very messy. I was a very, very messy, I think a lot of us who bottom out on alcohol or drugs, we got the signals, we get the red flags from friends who get anxious when we start drinking too much. And, I can tell when I'm slurring my words and beginning to stumble. And I could not drink like a gentleman or a lady. I was very, very messy. So they say in alcoholics, in my 12-step group, not to think about the next drink, just remember the last drink I had. And the last drink I had, I was face down in the gutter on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. So that's my reminder of where I will end up if I have one.
Well, I'm glad you're sober now, especially because you've been on the West Hollywood City Council, I think, continuously for the past 20 years. Is that right?
That's right, 20 years, yeah.
Is that a decision you've ever regretted?
Yes, periodically. I think anybody who goes into public service, you got to be prepared for a great deal of enthusiasm from activists in every segment and corner of the community. And when I tell young people who come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking of running for public office, can you give me some advice? I always say, how high is your desire to be liked? Because if you want to be liked, you're in the wrong business. Don't even get into the business. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, there will be criticism, there will be critics, there will be people who disagree. And if it's really your desire to be liked, be an activist. Because if you're an activist, you can be pure, you can be absolutely driven, persistent on one cause without, ever hesitating. When you become an elected, you have to find compromise and places where people can settle and try to resolve differences and conflict. And by its very design, you're going to have people unhappy one way or the other. So, there have been times when I've said, oh God, what am I doing? I went from, civil rights leader for LGBT community to having mocked up posters of, Jon Duran and posted around town. It's just part of the price you pay, I think, when you're a public servant, and it's okay. Overall, the things that we've been able to do in West Hollywood, the good outweighs the bad. And the thing I'm most proud of, actually, the creation of the West Hollywood Recovery Center and securing the log cabin facility across the street. That I am most proud of.
You had an interesting Facebook message or a posting, or you responded to some posting recently about, it was an explanation for why West Hollywood seemed to be allowing Black Lives Matter protests, but not a pride parade. Can you speak to that?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, because the post, let me back up. The city, we canceled all events, large events this year because of COVID-19. So Pride was canceled, Halloween was canceled, every large event in the city was canceled. Very disappointing to a lot of people. But in the era of, coronavirus, we have to make a lot of sacrifices. Then what happened is, George Floyd was murdered on May the 26th, and within a few days, protests began to spring up all over the nation. The leadership of CSW decided they were going to try to piggyback on that movement and try to have some version of gay pride. I am the only person of color ever elected to the West Hollywood City Council. I am the first and only. I come from the Latino community. And one of the things that's really hard when you're a minority is when you watch other people trying to hijack your movement. Because there was a message around the murder of George Floyd. The message was about racism, systemic racism, police brutality. That was the message. And having it become gay pride is not consistent with the message that they were trying to put out. So I think it was very reckless for the leadership of CSW to try to hijack a movement that was trying to make a point about police brutality and racism and try to turn it into some hybrid of gay pride instead. They didn't include the Black community in the discussions. They didn't include Black Lives Matter. It was very rushed. And unfortunately, I think it created more chaos than anything. So I think that's what you're alluding to. I think people should have just joined the Black Lives Matter movement and civil disobedience and not try to insert gay pride into the middle of that.
From what I understood, the people from Christopher Street West who were leading it were Black. Is that not true?
Well, I don't know the inner mechanics of all that because I'm not on the board of Christopher Street West. I think Christopher Street West, once they realized they'd made an error, they pulled out, and I'm getting this from what I read in the paper, not on firsthand knowledge. And then the two African-American members of the CSW board created something new called All Black Lives Matter. That was the compromise or the solution, and it happened. And I marched in it, masked, like 99% of the people I saw, we were all masked.
Yeah. How'd it go? Did you like the protest?
It felt really good to be back in my roots. You see, because I haven't always been an elected official. I started out as an activist. That's, where a lot of people who I think end up in government, their early beginnings, their early roots is in activism. So I came of age during the AIDS epidemic, when ACT UP decided they needed lawyers. I was a brand new lawyer, been in practice for about a year, and my partners and I became legal counsel for ACT UP. So we were representing the people who were in the streets getting arrested and demonstrating for many, many years. And then I represented the needle exchange, passing out clean needles to junkies to prevent the spread of HIV, and the early days of medical marijuana. So a lot of my early days was representing lawbreakers for a higher cause. And so it felt good to be back in my roots, to be out on the streets, raising a fist, yelling, protesting. It was kind of like, oh man, I'm back, deja vu, back in 1989. It was really great to be part of it.
From your perspective, and I know this is sort of a difficult question because it's such a complex issue, but if you had a magic wand and you could make one policy change or, basically just one change to the way America runs that could have an effect on the way race works in our society, what would that be?
You're right. That's a very complex question. I guess let me use Los Angeles. So I am Mexican American. 50% of this county, Los Angeles County, is Latino. By the way, half the county. Yet my culture is seen as a minority. And sometimes, I have photographs of Los Angeles where there's separate drinking fountains. One says whites only, one says Mexicans only. So the story of racism in Los Angeles can be traced all the way up to the 1960s.
I didn't even know that. I had no idea that happened here.
Despite the fact that, as I tell people, look at the streets. La Cienega is Spanish for the swamp. La Brea is Spanish for tar, hence the La Brea tar pits. The language all makes sense with what's been happening here for centuries. So if there was a way that, I could just wave a magic wand and people just understand that whatever culture they insert themselves into, whether it's the bayous of Louisiana or the cosmopolitan New York or the Jewish community of Brooklyn, that there's like a culture there that has existed for hundreds of years. And rather than judge it or think that it's something bizarre or foreign or to be despised, accept it for what it is and learn from it. And I, that's the way I was raised by my parents. I don't really understand racism. I didn't even know I was a minority until I went to college and they said, oh, you're Mexican, you're a minority. I'm like, what? Everybody in my neighborhood's Latino. What are you talking about? No, we're not. I didn't even know it until I was made aware, consciously that I was in a minority group. So I don't understand it completely, but I accept that it's a constant evolution of a country that's trying to figure out what the words all men are created equal. The men who wrote that did not include women, did not include transgender, did not include their slaves, did not include LGBT, did not include immigrants or foreign nationals. That's not what they meant when they intended it. But the words, the text of the words has come to mean so much more as we strive to become a more perfect union and to make those words meaningful in 2020.
I could talk to you all day, really. I mean, you're great. But we have a very important exercise we have to partake in. I've always admired you because you're spontaneous. And in light of that, I thought we might do a lightning round interview. Just 50 questions or so. So it's going to start easy. They might get more interesting. Are you ready?
I'm holding my breath.
First question, cupcakes or brownies?
Cupcakes.
Cup or cone?
Cone.
Still or sparkling?
Still.
Kindle or hard copy?
Hard copy.
Friends or Seinfeld?
Friends.
Show tunes or disco?
Show tunes.
Liza or Barbara?
Oh, man. Barbara.
Lloyd Webber or Sondheim?
Sondheim.
That's a relief. Best president who's not Lincoln?
Barack Obama.
Worst president who's not Trump?
Andrew Jackson. Slaughtered the Indians.
Yeah, good answer. Often or off 10?
Off 10.
Vase or vase?
Base.
Aunt or aunt?
Aunt.
Celebrity crush?
Brad Pitt.
Girl celebrity crush?
Jennifer Lopez.
Grinder or scruff?
Scruff.
LA in the 60s or New York in the 70s?
LA in the 60s. I was here.
New York in the 50s or LA in the 30s?
Oh, New York in the 50s.
Tats or piercings?
Tats.
Wealth or popularity?
I guess with wealth, I can buy popularity. Wealth.
Youth or beauty?
Beauty.
Marx or Friedman?
Friedman.
Huh. Margaret Thatcher or Richard Nixon?
Margaret Cho. Oh, I'm sorry. Margaret Thatcher.
Same question, but sexually.
Oh, Margaret Cho.
It's still Margaret Thatcher, but okay. Clay Aiken or Ruben Studdard?
Clay Aiken.
Horns or strings?
Horns. I'm Latino. We love the brass.
Cotton or leather?
Leather.
Repression or degeneracy?
Degeneracy.
Truth or tact?
Truth.
Wit or sensitivity?
Wit.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
Art or music?
Music.
Oprah or Ricky Lake?
Ricky Lake.
Picasso or Dali?
Dolly.
Dali or Delhi?
Dolly.
Leg day or chest day?
Leg day. It's all about the booty, babe.
Big dogs or little dogs?
Little dogs.
Can you change a tire?
Are you out of your mind?
Can you whistle?
Yes.
Can you dream in another language?
Yes.
Show me? Just kidding. Do you bite your nails?
I just had a mani-pedi. I guess no.
Have you ever been in a fist fight?
Yes.
Who threw the first punch?
The other person.
Is there a God?
Yes.
Do you have a drag name?
Yes.
What is it?
Myrtle.
When you eat out with a friend, do you split an appetizer or do you feel you deserve your own?
I don't order appetizers, babe. West Hollywood Athletics. Yeah.
Well,
no bread.
Sometimes you can have like a chicken satay or something. Do you tip before tax or after tax?
After tax.
Do kids like you?
They love me. They love Uncle John.
Do you avoid carbohydrates?
Yes.
Are you happy?
Yes.
All right, well, you've passed the test. I would say 70% of those answers were to my satisfaction. So very good.
Hey, that's good.
I'm more,
2/3.
yeah, I'm more of a Seinfeld than a Friends. I find ice cream cones can be cumbersome, but all in all, you seem to have a pretty good head on your shoulders.
Good. I'm glad I passed. Thank you,
Yes,
Ben.
you did. And thank you, Jon. Thank you so much for being here. It is always really fun to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Have a very happy Pride. And remember, if somebody tells you they're not political, you can tell them, if you wake up in bed with somebody of the same sex, by definition, you are political.
I'll let them know. I'll turn to them and I'll let them know in my bed. Thank you so much. Happy Pride to you, former mayor. Can you be Mr. Mayor forever, just like Mr. President forever?
People call me the mayor of Boys Town, so I'm the mayor of Boys Town.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. Who else? I mean, All right. Well, thank you so much, and happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Thank you.
Well, that's it for me. But before we go, how the fuck did we get here? We've got a pandemic out of control, millions out of jobs, and white supremacy is having a comeback. I blame a certain type of American, the non-voter. of which there are, in my estimation, 3 types. First, the my vote doesn't count people. Okay, tell that to Shelley Simons. She was a Democratic candidate who in 2017 lost a seat in the Virginia House of Delegates because the vote was tied and they drew the other guy's name out of a bowl. And what would have been a 50-50 split turned into 51-49 in favor of the party that's currently holding America's balls in a vice. Your vote counts, and not just on a federal level. I hear policing, for example, has a lot to do with locally elected sheriffs. I hear police prosecutions, or the lack thereof, have a lot to do with whoever is district attorney. That's another elected position. Then there are the I don't like anyone who's running people. Well, do you dislike any one of them less? Vote for that person. And maybe show up at a primary and you'll get your dream candidate next time. Then there are the it's all going to be fine people. Now that's an outlook I don't respect in any context. Look, we all took for granted that Trump would lose in 2016. He didn't. And that shit can't happen again. But here's the thing. These non-voters are our friends and family. Yes, I want to scream at them, but we do enough screaming already. It's time to get these people on our side. That means seducing them. That means not being mean to them just because they don't completely agree with every plank of our platform. We need every ally we can get. And I don't mean we queer people, I mean we patriots. I do in fact think there's hope for our country, but it's going to take effort. It means working to elect good, smart, enlightened people to public office. It means registering your friends and family to vote. It means slashing your racist aunt's tires on election day. Okay, lecture over. Let's get back to Pride. Stick around because next it's Trans Lounge with Lucky and Gina. They're going to be talking with Ian Harvey from Transparent, some folks from Trans Can Work, and the Trans Latina Coalition. That's Latina with an @ which recently made history coming out as the first transgender text symbol. Thank you all for tuning in or logging on or doing whatever you did to find your way to us, and happy, happy Pride. I'm Ben Kawaller, and I'll catch you somewhere else. Have a good one.